We are group 3, and we are going to talk about the cultural differences we can find while we are traveling by plane. Even at this moment, thousands of planes are flying overhead around the world. Yes. Under the standard aviation standards and the recommended practices developed by the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is called ICAO. They provide those aviation standards and regulations, and now at the moment, the 191 countries are the member of the ICAO, which means that all the airlines and countries are following their regulations, refers to the regulations. But however, you might have found some differences whenever you travel with the different airlines. Anyone can guess what these numbers are? Anyone?
The age of the flight hostess?
Right, correct. This is the average age of flight attendants of American Airline and Asia Airlines, which is Korean the carrier. We just thought that there must be some cultural issues on this. I'm not sure if you agree with me. It seems that the flight attendant on the right side looks much younger and attractive. Why? We found the first clue from the law. In the United States, the government strictly prohibits the employers to hire their employees on the basis of their appearance and sex and the age and the religion or something like that. In Korea, we also have that kind of equality law, but it's not that strict. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. The second one, it came from the perception of the passengers. As far as I know, the Americans put priority on much more on safety than service, because they feel more comfortable when they travel, when they are on a plane, because highly experienced flight attendant can rescue faster than the flight attendant who has the less experience. But in Korea, particularly male passengers, much care about the beauty of the flight attendant. Yes. They want to be treated like a king or a queen on a plane, so they much care about the services. The last one is the Gender-Related Development Index. A couple of weeks ago, the GDI was released. As you can see, the ranking of Korea's GDI is 117, and the United States ranked on 20. This means that Korean woman has less opportunity to go to have the prestigious job in Korea than in the States. So the flight attendant is one of the the job in Korea. So many the competition to get a job is really fierce. So because of this, the companies can have more options to hire the more attractive and more younger the flight attendants. These three factors are likely the reason why we can see the big difference between two airlines on the age.
So I want to talk about the cultural difference in another aspects in the airlines industry. Okay. Do you know this logo from the airline company? Some of them is from China, some of them is from Western, and I guess it's very easy to understand. This is from Western, Eastern, Western, China, Western. Can you give me some answer? This, Western. This. Western or East? Eastern. East. This is the new design of the Chinese airline. This Western. This okay, Cathay Pacific. It's from Hong Kong. China. This. Somebody know? The China airline, not Air China. China airline is from Taiwan. Chunqiu Economical Airlines, Shenzhen Airlines, and this is Hainan Airlines. So the difference in the China is the traditional Chinese culture prefer the beauty of implication. That means people won't use any like a plane or wings as its logo to show its business content. They prefer to use like such as the birds to show the meaning of the airplane, such as the China Eastern Airline use the swallow, the Shenzhen Airlines use the rock, Cathay Pacific use the wing, and this is Xiamen Airline, the seafood. On the other hand, Chinese airlines are designed, some logos are designed as a Chinese mystical beast. This is one of the biggest Chinese Air China use the phoenix as its logo. And the Junyao use dragon, and this is one of the Hong Kong Airline, Dragon Airlines, use the dragon. Because this beast in China means everything goes well and the business is booming. But what about the meaning in the Western? The phoenix in the Western will make people think about the fire and the rebirth. I think nobody will take flight think about fire and rebirth. On the other hand, the dragon in the West is fire-breathing lizard, evil and ruin. So it's totally different. And the Western logo design prefer the character. Okay. The character takes most parts of its logo. You can say Italian Airlines, Air France. The most part of the logo is characters, not like the China Airlines, Chinese Airlines. So what is the difference from? The Chinese characters is a pictogram design. You see, somebody may learn Chinese and know the meaning of this is mountain, look like mountain, this is the word of mountain. So Chinese people is easy to get meaning from the image. On the other hand, Western is how we can call the alphabetical writing. And the Western people is easy to get meaning from the sound. So that is the difference from.
Thank you. I would like to talk about the culture difference behind the airline meals. Actually, from these pictures, you will see quite a difference from the airline meals from different airlines. The left side is the Lufthansa. So Lufthansa is from Germany, so you will see the sausage, some sausages for the airline meals. And in the middle is a Thai airline, so he used a lot of curry food and seafood. So it's a typical Thai food. And in the left, it's Pingtong designed airline meals. So it's represent the Japan food. So mostly the airline meals represent the culture, the country's food cultures. And mostly the airline will provide the destination food for the client's requirements. For example, if you have the experience, if you fly to China, always you will find the rice in the airline, and some good airlines also provide the dim sum and the congee in the breakfast. So here you can see the two pictures. What's the difference about the two airline meals? The two airline is very famous. One is Lufthansa, and the other is Emirates. So the two airline is quite famous for their good quality service and food. But it's quite different because in the left, the Lufthansa will provide more than 30 wines choice in the airline meals for the passengers. But for Emirates, they have only the drinks for some juice, teas, waters. Why? Because why about that? Because the airline meals also reflect the religion difference behind it. So in a lot of Islamic airlines, for example, Emirates, Malaysia, Gulf Air, and Pakistan, they were not allowed to use pork and any alcohol drinks to serve in the airlines because most of them are Muslim passengers. There is an interesting thing because in China, if you find that in China, all the Chinese airlines will not provide pork in the airline food because the Muslim group is the second largest group in China. So, I think some of you will have some experience about some China Airlines awful airline meal. It's not so good like some foreign airlines. Why? Because why is this the reasons? We're thinking about that because in China Airline, most of them are compete for their price. So most of China's passengers, they will think, oh, the meal is okay, I just need it, but not so good, it's okay. But in the foreign airlines, most of the foreign airlines are compete for their service and most compete for their catering service. Why? Why is that? Because most of foreign passengers, they think the food experience is very important when they have some travels. So I think this is the culture difference behind the airline foods.
So for my part, I'd like to discuss about the airline ranking system and whether or not it can be explained by cultural differences. So Skytrack, they publish every year the top 10 airlines, or the top airlines in the world. And very consistently, you see 10 companies on these. So what is in common about these 10 companies? Well, first, you can notice that 6 of these airlines are East Asian. 3 of them are from the Middle East. 1 is from Australia, but 0 from English-speaking Western countries. So how can you explain that? Well,
No.
maybe you have a question after. So we decided to use the Hofstede cultural dimensions that framework to see if there are any cultural differences. The Hofstede cultural dimensions, it explains and looks at differences in cultures. So the first dimension is high versus low power distance. So you can see that Western countries have a much lower score, which means that they are more tolerant, they're less tolerant for differences in hierarchy. Whereas for high power distance countries, that means that these countries, the people there, are more likely to accept unequal balances. So for example, in Korean Airlines or Asiana, you can tell that even the way that the staff are trained is that they'll kneel down and bend down to the passenger level when they serve food, which is to acknowledge the difference in terms of status or power level. And while in the Western culture, it's more about the way to treat customers is you treat customers the way you want to be treated. But in Eastern culture, it's more like the customer is king or the customer is God. The second dimension is individualism versus culturalism, and Anna and her group, she talked about this dimension. So essentially, countries that are more Western have a more individualistic culture, whereas Asian countries are more collectivist. So they tend to think about the greater good, and that they're born into a society where it's all about the group, whereas it's a we versus a me kind of concept. The third dimension is masculinity versus femininity. So this dimension measures more of not cultures that are more masculine, but cultures that are masculine are defined as cultures that are more aggressive, are more goal-seeking, whereas feminine cultures are more in a way tending to people's feelings, more about the equality of women and men. And the last one is long-term versus short-term. So countries that have more of a long-term perspective are countries that have very little to do with short-term gains or to do with instant gratification, but more so a lot of it has to do with perseverance, a lot to do with ability to see on the long-term perspective. And we can see that the Eastern cultures have a higher long-term ranking than the ones on the Western cultures. And this is also one factor that this dimension actually highlights is the country's ability to see the differences. Sorry, let me just get that point. The last one is indulgence versus restraint, which is how quickly or how much a country puts on reaching short-term goals. And we can see that they're, on the left-hand side, the Western cultures, they're definitely very, very different in terms of these dimensions. And on the Eastern countries, we can see that these numbers are very contrasting as well. So while it may not be like a kind of a strategy on how to teach companies how to best do the service, but what this dimension can serve to do is a way to explain perhaps why there is a difference in terms of the culture, the services that are provided in Eastern airlines versus Western airlines. And the point that I want to get back at for short-term versus long-term is that one big difference between a long-term and short-term kind of perspective is long-term perspective countries. The way that the students perceive success and failure is success is based on hard work and effort, whereas failure and success in kind of short-term looking countries is based on luck. So in the way that you can compare airlines on the Eastern airlines like or Asian countries, you'll see that the airlines, when you look at the low-cost carriers, the ones that try to cut costs, you'll see that on the Western carriers like United Airlines, a lot of the cost-cutting things are like, we'll see if we can reduce or eliminate some of the features. Whereas on the Eastern airlines, it's more about we want to cut costs, but then we realize that we can't really cut the cost for consumers. We need to actually cut the cost for our own efficiency. So we need to make sure that we can find ways to be much more operationally efficient. So with that said, that concludes our presentation. Is there any questions?
I'm sorry that you didn't compare the food from some of the American carriers, because having flown recently in the United States now, they don't bring you any food. First they ask you for money.
Yeah.
And that also is a cultural difference, but it's relatively new in the industry. And a lot of people are very unhappy about it.
Yes.
You get on a plane and there is no meal unless you actually give the stewardess your credit card. So, very good. Okay, let's take 10 minutes.